In this video, we're going to take a look at activity 1.3.3 called Constraining a Sketch. To get started, we're going to go ahead and make sure to change our active project over to a new single user project. And in the project name, we'll just call this Constraining a Sketch. For my folder, I'm going to click on the ellipse button. This folder that I'm saving things in is in my documents, and I'll go ahead and select PLTW IED. When I select that folder, I'm actually going to select to make a new folder, and I'm going to leave that sit just for a second because usually it'll time out on me as I'm starting to type. And I can actually go ahead and I'll hit the backspace here. Activity 1.3.3 Constraining a Sketch. I'll select enter, have that folder selected, and select OK. Notice how it'll have that in the file path, and I can select finish. Here is the Constraining a Sketch, and I can go ahead and select done. And it'll also show the active project right here. I'm going to start off by going to the new button and selecting a standard IPT, and go ahead and select create. In this video, we're going to cover steps 3 through 8, which is going to involve the concave polygon. And where we're going to live right now is we're going to go into the sketch environment. So I'll select Start 2D Sketch, and I'm just going to pick the XY plane. They just want us to create a sketch profile of a concave polygon. So down here, I'll kind of maybe touch the origin. It'll help me keep a tracking line. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of draw this kind of random shape that they kind of want us to kind of sketch out. And I'm going to refer back to my drawing here just for a second in the activity. So just need to get a picture of what this looks like to get the proper lines and everything going on here. Here we go. So we got a vertical line. We got one that kind of comes down at an angle like this, one like this, one that kind of comes up, it's a little bit higher, kind of comes down, and then we want to connect down. So anytime you have a green dot, you're going to connect to a previous endpoint of a line. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And here, I can go ahead, I'm going to right click and select OK. Stop using the line tool. And here's the sketch that we kind of have going on with these particular settings. So whenever I'm playing around with lines, number one, the colors of the lines definitely indicate whether or not I got some movements. If I select a line, you'll see I get these little kind of icons that'll pop up, these what we call glyphs. And the glyphs will indicate, like this one here, that this is a parallel. These two lines are parallel. See how they're both highlighted? So if I click off of that, if I select this line here, if I just move it like this, it just moves up and down. This line has a parallel with this bottom line. If I try to move it, notice how I can't really change it too much. If I click and drag, same thing on this one. This one ends up having a parallel. If I try to click on the endpoint, notice how it just adjusts this. Same thing, it keeps this line horizontal. Same thing on this one. If I do that, I can't really kind of move or anything. This line I can go in all kinds of directions. So just kind of playing around with some of those things. The biggest thing to kind of show you is that down here in some of your options, you do have a button that says show all degrees of freedom. And when you do that, it kind of shows you like where do you still have degrees of freedom. It's kind of a neat little feature to help you analyze a sketch as you're kind of looking at some of those items. So just wanted to show you that that's one thing that you can kind of take a look at as far as your constraints. I'm going to go ahead and hide that down here. Up here you can also see you have some constraint settings. You have a button that says show constraints. So, and if I highlight these lines here, so I'm just going to click and drag to highlight them and select that show constraints option. It'll show you all the constraints that are there, and you can tell by the icons they're going to match to what these look like up here. So this is like parallel and everything as such. So if you don't want to show those, you can always hide them. Again, you have to select your line work and then be able to do that. Let me go ahead and see if I can do some of those things. In fact, let me go ahead and just hit escape, highlight, and then go ahead and toggle that off. So, but anyway, all those different items will show up as far as that. This has automatic dimensions and constraints being applied, and this one has some of the constraint settings. So you can always display them on creation, show them for different selected objects. Just depends on what you kind of want to have going on there. I'm going to go ahead and select cancel, and that's dealing a little bit with the Inventor environment. Getting used to kind of just knowing as you click and drag, if I want to get rid of a constraint, I can always select it. I can right click and say, here I can say like hide all constraints if I just right click through there. But if I want to show all the constraints, again, just toggle that back on. And if I want to get rid of, like, let's say this parallel, I can right click on it. I'm going to say OK to get off that show constraints. But if I right click on it, I can actually select delete, or I can actually just select it and select delete on my keyboard. Now if I move this line, I can move it like this, and I can also take a look at, if I try to grab like the endpoint of this line, looks like the coincident constraints. Same kind of thing. I've got two of them. If I select and delete that one, now you can see that these two lines are able to come apart, and these two lines are no longer parallel. So if you're wanting to delete constraints, or like on this one, deleting, now I can kind of take a look at moving this line, and if I need to kind of make some adjustments, I can always move around and kind of do some of those things. So just depends on what you're kind of working with. If I want to bring these back, go ahead and snap them together, and then, like, for example, I can always kind of reapply a constraint by choosing like horizontal, selecting the line, selecting this line, and that'll kind of bring back that particular constraint. So, all right, last step here. Just that's kind of what the first few steps are, steps 3 through 8. I'll have you just kind of playing around with being able to show those constraints and everything. And if you want to hide them, just right click on a constraint and say hide all constraints. I'm going to go ahead and just finish the sketch. They would like us just to extrude this shape, just to show that, number one, that you've got we'll do maybe about a 1/2 inch, and we'll select OK. And this will end up finishing out the concave polygon. So we'll go ahead and select the save button, and we'll call this concave polygon. And this will finish out the first video with steps 3 through 8 for activity 1.3.3, constraining a sketch.